Okay, and we're live. Hey, Denise, thanks for joining us.
Sure, happy to be here.
Yeah, happy Thursday. Where are we? Where are you speaking to us from?
Somerville, New Jersey.
Nice. Okay. And just by way of introduction, I'm Joseph Shapiro. I co-founded the Psychedelic League with Sarah Price, and we have our good friend Denise with us this afternoon to talk about psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapy. And so, Sarah, would you mind making some introductions?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Denise, welcome. Super happy to have you here, and also would like to welcome you as a board member, or excuse, board of advisor for Psychedelic League. We really appreciate you kind of bringing your expertise to Psychedelic League. So, Denise has a really broad background. Currently, she is a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW, as the alphabet soup of the healthcare world would say. But further back in your background, you initially started out as a speech and language pathologist for many years, which as a NICU nurse, we engaged with quite a bit in our feeding.
Yeah.
And then from there, you moved on, and I love this one. You moved into hypnosis and was trained in hypnosis. That's another thing I've dove into, as well as just a recipient and a really powerful modality. And through that experience, that then led you to turn towards the LCSW and being trained as a therapist. Sounds like just such a broad experience. And also, your experience divides itself into like hospice care as well as severe trauma, and whether that's childhood trauma, adult trauma. So just really expansive experience. And then it sounds like that is the part of your life that sort of led you to explore psychedelics for yourself and the research. Yeah, the research can be really compelling, but once you experience it for yourself, it completely shifts how powerful you realize that it is.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. And then from what I understand, that experience, like a singular experience, led you down the road of facilitating at a retreat center and an enormous number of client journeys or patient journeys, however wording you guys use for that.
Human beings.
Human journeys, yes. We're all there, humans. We're humans.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Would love to hear a lot more about that retreat experience and the experience of psychedelics. So I'm going to kind of like hand it over to you to sort of open up that door of painting the picture of what that looks like.
Yeah. Thanks so much. So I came to psychedelics very late in life. I never used psychedelics. And when I was working at a community mental health agency, and I was working with a severely traumatized population, and I started reading the research that was coming out of Johns Hopkins and NYU, Imperial College. And I just said, you know what, this could alleviate so much suffering because my clients got better, but it was really a hard slog, you know? So since I had never done psychedelics myself, I felt I have to learn how to do this myself. So in 2018, I booked a retreat in Jamaica. And my first experience on 3 grams was really transformational. Healed a lot of grief that I was holding over many deaths in my life and some childhood wounds. And at the end of that dose, I turned to the retreat leader and I said, I don't think I can go back to my job because how can I sit in a room with someone and use talk, which I completely believe in, but when I know that this is available and this can catalyze healing for so many people. So I did go back to my job, but in 2019, I did move to Jamaica and worked in the retreat world for over 3 years. So I've worked with hundreds of people in the group context over the course of a week, 3 psilocybin doses, a prep session, integration sessions, and a lot of community and one-on-one support. So that gave me a great, probably I've witnessed about 1,500 psilocybin journeys. And then when I came back to the States, I had the opportunity to teach for Fluence, their certification course for Oregon certification for facilitators. And then being involved in the advocacy world, which is where we met, I've just been able to kind of feel what it's like in many of the different areas. And as a therapist, I believe so much in this modality. It offers such potential for healing. And that is why I'm so compelled by it and why I'm working so hard to get supported psilocybin services in New Jersey, because I believe in it from my own personal extensive experience, witnessing so many journeys, but in reading the literature.
Yeah, and I know I sort of jumped ahead a little bit, so I'm going to kind of like let us sort of step back a touch on what even is psilocybin. What are these magical, transformative mushrooms? What is in them? What does the research tell us about these compounds?
Yeah, so psilocybin is a natural compound found in over 200 species of mushrooms. They've been used extensively by indigenous peoples over the millennia. We have cave paintings dating back about 4,700 BC. There were mushroom cults, and these substances were used within the context of a respectful community led by an elder or a shaman. And then in the late 1940s, LSD was synthesized by Albert Hofmann. Sandoz Pharmaceuticals started sending out LSD to private psychiatrists and research institutions. And then when they synthesized psilocybin into indocybin and they started marketing that in 1960, we had 2 decades of very robust research surrounding psychedelics. And I don't think a lot of people know that, because we talk about this now as being the psychedelic renaissance, but it's really the third wave. So in 1950, 1960s, there were about 1,000 clinical studies with over 40,000 participants, conferences, books. And psychiatrists, therapists were using these psychedelic substances to work with a variety of conditions, like end-of-life anxiety, like depression, anxiety, substance use disorders, autism. And it was showing great, great promise. But then, of course, it all shut down with the Controlled Substances Act in 1970. And then the research resumed in the early 2000s. So once ingested, psilocybin metabolizes to psilocin, that's the active metabolite, and it connects, it kind of docks in some of the serotonin receptors, and this causes changes in perception, emotional processing. It increases empathy, connection to self and others and the world, and it offers experiences that aren't really available when we're in our ordinary state of consciousness. So these are the experiences which really catalyze healing. So these are experiences like having ego dissolution, having your ego, that tightly concretized narrative sense of ourself, having it dissolve so different parts of our psyche can communicate. We can come up with novel solutions to problems. We can have emotional breakthroughs, cognitive insights, mystical experiences, and all of these experiences that people can have on psilocybin really equate to healing of many mental health conditions and just to overall flourishing. Um, so we do have extensive research. We have, now we can draw on what happened, what's been going on in Oregon. I know we'll get to that. But as a therapist, this substance holds so much promise when it's used within a safe container, attention to set, which is the mindset, the preparation, the intention of the voyager, and the setting, which is a setting where there's safety, where there's comfort, where there is support by a facilitator or a guide to help someone if they encounter any challenges during the experience.
That's so beautifully said. I think it's so often, I always say that, mushrooms have been part of all of our history since like the beginning of time. Like these are, yes, they're new in terms of new-ish in terms of research and the way we can brain image and this sort of stuff. But this plant has been around and available to us since the beginning of humanity. And it's a beautiful, beautiful gift that's been offered.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to think about what if research hadn't shut down in 1970? What if we had had all those decades of research and supported use? It was interesting to think about what the mental health situation in our country would be like now.
Well, I feel like we would be sorry, go ahead, Joe.
It's very interesting. What's exciting, the silver lining of all that lost time is that we get to see on the ground how it's going to happen, how it's going to fold out, and we get to be part of it. Everybody listening gets to be part of it because it's happening right now. Whatever happens with the New Jersey bill that we're going to talk about more, there is one state that's already online, and I know we've spoken offline, and the service centers operating in Oregon are doing wonderful things, despite what you might be hearing, in the news cycles.
Yeah.
So it is promising, and then we have Colorado coming online fairly soon as well. So we're going to actually see how it's playing out, and it's going to take some time for it to become national. But if you look at the model of cannabis, which is the closest analog that we can see when it comes to state regulation of a controlled substance, you'll see there's a lot of buildup in the beginning. There's a lot of hand-wringing, and then it just is accepted and it kind of spreads. And then once that happens, how many years do you think we'll need to get it? Once, let's say, the majority of states have a state-regulated program in place, and/or there's FDA-approved drugs which are accessible through DEA licensed doctors. What kind of time frame do you think we're going to need to really look back and say, wow, look at the sea change we're seeing?
Let me get my magic ball here. Well, I don't know, because it's intricate, and we've seen that with the Lycos, MDMA, brouhaha that's going on now. Okay, so we don't know if MDMA is going to be rescheduled, but there's still, and we've seen this in our advocacy, so many misconceptions. All right, we come to psychedelics with our bias, with our inherent bias. Most people now have been through the DARE program. I mean, I grew up, hearing a lot of scary, incorrect information. And usually in the education, psychedelics are conflated with other illicit drugs, like heroin and methamphetamine. And we know from studies that use of a psychedelic in general during one's lifetime is actually protective of suicidality and mental health conditions, right? Whereas use of other illicit drugs like heroin, cocaine, is actually predictive of mental health issues. So these aren't the same substances. So I think we have to really hit people with education rather than myth, which is what many people are holding. Many people are afraid. And I think we really want to be careful not to conflate this with cannabis, because this treatment that we're talking about in New Jersey, in Oregon, in Colorado, it isn't a pill, it isn't a dispensary. It is a substance plus therapy or plus support. Okay. So I think it's important for people to understand it's not just, oh, I'm going to get psilocybin and I'm going to take it home and trip on my deck. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about using this powerful, safe substance, but with support, with preparation, a preparation session, the medicine session or the administration session, and the integration session. So it's 3 parts. So it is not just a drug that you take like an antidepressant, and it is not like cannabis that you get from a dispensary. It is a really different animal. It is support plus the substance.
I think you're just the exchange between my last question and your answer illustrates how tricky it is to even discuss psychedelics, even to pose the question right, and it's going to be such an exercise in learning storytelling for all of us. And I want to thank you, Denise, because every time you either presented to the New Jersey State Bar Association or you're testifying down in Trenton before the legislature, you always speak very well and very clearly. And that kind of clarity is so important, because every word has meaning and can trigger some thought or maybe even some further misconception. So thanks for like pulling that apart. My like esoteric question, really the underlying one, was like if you could, use your crystal ball in the future, what, like society as a whole, and please don't let me go down this rabbit hole too long. Like people use psychedelics, it becomes more mainstream. Like, what would you expect to see the result on when it comes to wellness or like consciousness expansion, and what would you see as a result of that happening in the more of the population?
If other states adopted this, if it was rescheduled, if people could, there's an uptick in psychedelic use since 2020 anyway. So people are using this. It's just, are they using it with the correct education around it? If we could kind of reprogram our minds to see this substance, not as a pill, something that we're just taking to feel better, but as an initiatory process. I'm going to use this in order to travel to meet my suffering or my symptoms, whatever you want to call it, what I'm struggling with, in order to go through the process, meet it with compassion and curiosity, and come out the other side. Okay, that attitude towards one's symptoms, I don't even like that word, that's very different than the medical model, right? Which is depression bad, anxiety bad, PTSD bad, medicate it, numb it. Okay, that's fine, but we know now, after decades of antidepressant use, that's not moving the dial. Okay, numbing isn't adequate. Okay, people are suffering. So if we can educate people that their suffering doesn't make them pathological. It's part of life. And that if you could address your suffering with this substance, if you meet the criteria, so you can actually be transformed rather than just numbed, right? That requires courage, but it's a different attitude. And I don't think many of the legislators got that, because it's very much this pill model. Okay, so that's a misconception that we have to alter. And then another thing that I'd love to see changed through this work with psychedelics is an increased focus on community. Okay, we live in a very hyper independent society, right? Where we're going to do it on our own. Well, do you think that's one reason we're so anxious and depressed? Because we're not in healthy community. We don't feel supported. We're very isolated. This substance calls us into community, into community with ourselves, to know ourselves better, into community with other people, but also into community with nature. So we have improved nature relatedness. So I would hope that if people could reframe their relationship with their own suffering, with their own psyche, and with community, I think if you could heal those and using psilocybin as a catalyst, that would be a game changer for society. You know, I don't want to paint this rosy picture like mushrooms save the world, but they could sure be a good start. So I'm hopeful for, a decade down the line. I see how things have changed so much in the 5 years. I left for Jamaica in 2019. Back now, we weren't having these conversations when I left.
That's incredible. I think reframing, such a big part of life in general. I talked with Sarah about that. Just in any aspect of your life, your career, if you can slightly get a different perspective on what you're working on, and I think the way you framed it, instead of numbing, you are addressing, and then increasing the community, because that's what we've heard from current service center operators is, people who are in their bubbles, they know they want. A lot of the people going to use psilocybin in Oregon know they've already decided, they've watched Netflix and they've seen How to Change Your Mind, and they've read the dozens of hours or that needed to make a decision. They've already made their decision. They're going to go take psilocybin, and then when they emerge with a community, which is super important in many aspects of life. People are too alone. That's why, personally, one of the best things I've done is gotten involved with sport where you're with other people. Like instead of just going to the gym, you're with a sport where you engage with other people, and that becomes your community. And I think, the idea of psychedelics as a catalyst for community is such a great perspective, as opposed to the drug itself, because it's a catalyst for sure, but it's really for the community and for exploring. And we all, I think, on this call recognize that a lot of the people who are involved in psychedelics have had kind of the same sea change, and they're all now like moving in new directions, and it's vast majority is extremely positive.
Yes, the majority is very positive, absolutely. And I think, as a therapist, as a nurse, as a researcher, right? That we know what tools we have to work with a client, a patient, right? And it's frustrating when you don't have the right tools. So to be now back in the New Jersey and to be working with clients with childhood sexual abuse and, as adults, and to know, gosh, I can't, they have to go to a retreat or go to Oregon in order to receive psilocybin services. Whereas if I could work with them legally, then we could really kick things up a notch, right? Maybe we wouldn't have to sit here and struggle for another year or 2 or 3. Maybe one session might really kick it up a notch.
Totally.
There is a selling point that you hear these days in the psychedelic community about, and people don't necessarily endorse this, but they also don't deny it, that one session can fix everything, and it's not exactly right. And so what you just said is different than that, right? It's not a one time I'm done. It's a pill that does everything, and then I can walk away, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way you framed it is important, and I think you nailed it earlier. Understanding that distinction, it's a very nuanced distinction. So, how do you communicate? How do we communicate that to legislators and people who are going to be making decisions about this?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's an element of mystery, right, about this substance. It's an ancient substance, and the work of science is to just like pin it down, pin everything down, and we absolutely need that. But we're not going to be able to tie psilocybin to the chair and beat it with a rubber hose. I mean, there's going to be an element of mystery, right? So can you say, all right, here's a person with XYZ symptoms, and I predict that they're going to need 3 sessions with psilocybin. Maybe, but sometimes things happen rather miraculously in a session. And I have seen people with pretty significant trauma have a one and done experience, but then they're committed to it and they take what they've learned and they run with it in integration. They work it, right? But I would say the older you are and the more concretized those parts of the brain that are, that default mode network, how rigid it is. I think it's possible that you're going to need maybe, reboots. Like in the retreat world, we'd have people come back every year sometimes. Yeah.
And so, how would we have you kind of visualized the best case scenario here in Jersey right now, like taking all practical aspects into consideration and the very medicalized concept that we're working with, and assuming we can't change everyone's medicalized perspective. I mean, we know that's a necessity. That's a necessary way to frame it. It seems these days, right?
It does. It seems that that's the way it is in our medical model.
Right. So how do you think we move forward here? And I think we're all part of the there's a coalition, right, in New Jersey of people working together who are pushing this bill forward. And so one of the crucial things we're discussing now, right, is how do we message this properly, and what are the top 3 things we need to say to get the mayor of a town, like you're in Somerset, perhaps maybe one day you'll meet with the city council. Like how do we convince the city council and the mayor of Somerset that even when the legislature passes a bill and lets the act go through and allow service centers to open, how do you convince them that this is going to be good for the community? I know it's a big ask, but
okay. Well, since we are, very scientifically oriented in our culture, you present the research. This is what we know. This is where we need to go with further research. But this is what we know. I mean, even the FDA acknowledged that psilocybin showed great potential for alleviating the symptoms of major depressive disorder. Okay, so it became a breakthrough therapy in 2019. Okay, so we know from the research shown great efficacy for several conditions: depression, end of life anxiety, some substance use disorders, and other conditions. So we have the research. So you stick to the science, bring them the statistics for mental health conditions in the state. The tools that we have are not addressing the needs, and that this is a potential. So stick to the science. It can alleviate suffering, dispel the fears. This is not cannabis. This is not a dispensary. It is a highly, highly regulated system. So many regulations. The facilitators are trained. They have to go through extensive training to be able to support someone. Every facet of this is going to be regulated, right? The substances that's being used, the transportation, who handles the substances. Like any other system, like a school, it's highly regulated, all right? So I would dispel that idea that it's just going to be some dispensary down on the corner and there's going to be a lot of drug related problems. So try to tease out, okay, it is a drug, but it's not an illicit drug like heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl, anything like that. And I think just having conversations with people, that one-on-one, talking to people, and most of us have been touched by mental illness. Most of us have been touched by addictions. Most of us know people in the armed services who return from deployment with PTSD. We know people at end of life who are struggling with end of life anxiety and despair. So this is human suffering. And we have this tool. Let's look at the reality of it and not to the myth of it. And then let's go in. Let's dip our toe in. We see how it's played out in Oregon. We pretty soon Colorado will be up and running. We'll get to observe what happens there. So we're not, the forerunner here. We can draw on a lot of wisdom from the other states that have gone ahead.
That's a great point. It's sometimes there's business lessons that have been and I'm going to paraphrase, but it's sometimes really good to be second, not first. And I think that we're seeing that now. What I'm going to put on the screen here is a link to New Jersey Psychedelic, should say Therapy Association, which it doesn't. So maybe we can jump in and you can tell us how you about the founding of it and what you're working on and what you'd like to see in the future for the NJPTA.
Yeah. So like I said, I got back from Jamaica in December of 2022, and I hadn't lived here for a while, so I'm kind of sniffing out, well, what's going on here? And that's really why I started NJPTA. It's like, well, where are the other people? So I just started it on Meetup. And people came. Most of the therapists who joined initially are ketamine-assisted therapists, right? When we talk about psychedelic-assisted therapy, right now in New Jersey, that does mean ketamine, right? Um, and so it was just very organic. People came who were interested. They'd had personal experiences of their own healing. They'd seen great things with ketamine. They've been through some of the training programs like CIIS or IPI. They were getting their certifications in the hopes that these substances are going to be, uh, you know, deregulated. Um, so we just kind of just started to meet, and we said, okay, we need education, we need support for the people doing this work, and we need advocacy. And the psilocybin bill 2283 was already introduced by Nicholas Scutari in the Senate. And so that seemed like a great place for us to put our energy. And then we became part of the psilocybin coalition with New Approach and Cluster Busters and some professors from Rutgers, different advocates. So we're all just coming from this place of we believe in these substances, specifically psilocybin. Let's educate other therapists and let's educate the population. So that's what we're doing.
And sorry if you, I'm taking all the air, but so just jump in anytime you want. But my question is, okay, let's say we may wave a magic wand, the regulations are in, service centers are opening. How would you foresee, Denise, integrating this into your existing practice? And what would be the workflow for someone if they come to you and they're like, Denise, I saw you on Sarah and Joe's talk and really want to retain you, and then how would it work? I retain you, and then we go to do a couple of psychedelic, psilocybin sessions, then we come back. What's your workflow professionally?
Okay. Yeah, spoken like a lawyer. I'm going to retain you as my personal psychedelic assistant therapist. Okay. So if I would be working at a psilocybin service center, okay, I would probably have to go through a training program. I might be legacied in because of my real world experience, but I would have to take the test. I would have to get my facilitator's certification. Okay. And then I would find a service center and probably rent a room out of a service center. And probably, we don't know what it's going to be like for advertising. There may be some prohibition about advertising, but through word of mouth, through my existing caseload, people might contact me and I would screen them. So I would screen them. Not everyone is suitable for using these substances. So right now, if you have schizophrenia, if you have bipolar disorder, or a first degree family member with those conditions, you're probably not going to be suitable for psilocybin assisted therapy. If you've taken lithium in the last 30 days, if you have a seizure disorder, if you're on certain psychotropic medications, you may not be a great fit. Okay, so that would be screened out. And if you are found suitable, then I would do the preparation session. Okay, and that's preparation, administration session, integration session. So the preparation session would be really understanding someone's background, what's their trauma history, what are they struggling with, what do they hope for by using this substance? What do they know about it? Do they have a past experience? Maybe they had a bad trip in their past. what, uh, yeah, how are they prepared? What is their distress tolerance? Because this experience can be temporarily destabilizing. So someone has to be able to kind of navigate if things get a little rocky. All right. So all that has to be done within that preparation session. And I imagine I, as facilitator, would say, I don't think you're ready yet. We need another session, right? Because the person has to feel safe and grounded. You have to have that therapeutic alliance. Someone has to trust you deeply before they go into a non-ordinary state of consciousness. So it's a lot to do in that prep session. And then you would use your clinical judgment. Then we would have the medicine session, and that is a 6 to 8 hour experience, depending on how long they take to metabolize the medicine. And then during that's an inward experience with eye shades and music. The facilitator isn't doing talk therapy per se, but they're providing a container of safety. So if it gets rough, a hand on the shoulder, holding your hand, saying you're doing great, continue to breathe, you're doing wonderfully, this is the medicine working, this will be over in beginning, middle, end. So that's how that would look. And then the integration session, and probably more than one integration session. So as I understand it in Oregon, the facilitators are setting their own rates, and then they're renting out a room in the service centers. And how I would love it to play out is more group work, because group work adds a whole other layer of healing. People feel less isolated. People hear from other people in their group that, oh, that person, oh, that happened to that person. Oh, that person's suffering too. Maybe I'm not weird or wrong. Oh, so you begin to develop empathy even before you take the psilocybin. And then that cohort, that group, can be a source of support for one another as they go on. So my heart is really in the group work. I love one work, but group work is really where the rubber meets the road for me.
And was that primarily how you were facilitating sessions when you were in Jamaica?
Yeah, it was groups.
Yeah.
Week-long groups, 3 doses, which for people who are coming in, say they're highly psychiatrized, meaning they've been in therapy for decades, taken every conceivable psychotropic medication, they've had ECT, nothing has really moved them. And so those individuals tend to need multiple doses. Yeah.
And logistically, say we're back here in Jersey and we're two years from now, I don't know exactly how, and then we have service centers available. How would you envision that setting being structured? Because, I imagine in Jamaica, you're at a resort where you're all walking to where the facilitation's happening, walking back to a room. It's all very comfy.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your, wave a magic wand? How would that work here in Jersey? Would you envision something similar to Jamaica, just here in Jersey?
Well, I don't think that, I don't think it would be that intense, but a group where, because doing 3 doses over the course of a week, that's intense. In the clinical trials, they're not doing it that frequently. Maybe they're separating it by the doses by a few weeks. So you could design something like that. So most of the psilocybin service centers in Oregon have a group room. Okay, so say you had a cohort, a group of 8 to 12 clients or patients, and you had for 8 patients, you would have maybe 3 facilitators. Okay, so everyone could be tended to. Um, then then the the group room is comfortable enough with enough separation for people that they're not on top of each other and absorbing each other's energy. So we're talking about this. Usually people are coming for a therapeutic dose. And I know, guys, see, you're mentioning the microdose. So a microdose technically is a subperceptual dose. It's you could have a group come together with a microdose, but you're not feeling any psychedelic effects. You may just feel a change in your mood or whatever. Um, and also the science is out on microdosing. I know some people want to start small. With the science, we really don't know. We can't separate out what is placebo effect. So I work with macrodoses, and if people want to come to a service center and get a microdose and go in starting small, absolutely. But I don't know. I mean, people are doing it in a group, and that's fine. Although they may be doing a mesodose, which is something that is perceptible. So, say a 1 gram dose. So, that's not technically a microdose.
So yeah, thanks, Guy. And the reference to the chat was Guy. Guy has been adding comments here. Thanks, Guy, as always. And so one of the points that Guy raises here, we were talking earlier about how do you sell this concept to your local municipality, because Psychedelic League is focused on that. We really enjoyed the advocacy on the state level, which is we've been grateful to be able to do that, being part of the coalition, and continue to do that. However, you're going to have to also have the municipalities who are not engaged in considering this bill buy in, and the sooner the better. And so how do we, and this is just for the group, really, like, unlike cannabis, where there was a built-in mechanism for getting municipalities some money from sales, how do we articulate that this community building and general wellness in their town is going to kind of trickle down to some kind of benefit, whether financial or an inverse, like a reverse strain, relieving a strain on their existing social services, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah.
These are the kind of ways we have to think about talking, financials, because in New Jersey, at least, a lot of the towns who already thought about cannabis, one of their first questions is going to be, where's our money, effectively, because we're going to have to do all this extra work, and so I think one of the things we have to do is talk about, how this will lessen the burden on the infrastructure, so that's just something I'm throwing out there again, because I do think, safety is one of the top things we want to hit. And then it's like, what is the deliverable for your town? And again, reducing opioid issues. We know that that's a big strain on economies.
Right.
So just throwing that out there. Didn't really have an answer, but I appreciate everyone jumping in on the chat.
I'd love to kind of throw, and actually this kind of pulls back to something I wanted to ask you, Denise, about earlier. And where I think this actually kind of ties into, Joe, your question here about like, how does this end up, being monetized of somehow for the municipality? Like, where is their real financial benefit? And, one of the things that I found personally is that through these experiences with mushrooms, with other psychedelics, is it brings back this piece of like self-love to where you care for your body differently. And I wonder if you've seen any data, or if you saw this maybe in your work in Jamaica or with maybe other clients, where the way they start caring for their body changes to where it creates, a measurable difference in their physical health that sort of starts to relieve some of the burden on burden on businesses, on insurance, on healthcare systems. And I've like that this can really spread because I saw it in myself.
Oh yeah, and there's so much research that needs to be done on the effects of psilocybin on health conditions, right? In chronic pain, we know that it's a miracle for cluster headaches. We know that it reduces inflammation. Um, I just read a survey study of of, of associating lifetime use of psychedelics, just meaning that you have used it once during your lifetime.
Mhm.
And that cohort had a lower instances of obesity, better heart health, lower incidence of cancer. Okay. So there's going to be some health benefits that are coming out of this research. We had people on retreat who came in for depression and said, "Oh, for the first time in 30 years, I'm not in chronic pain. My arthritis has cleared up." We had people who no longer needed glasses. We had sort of weird and miraculous physical recovery with this substance. So listen, if you're in better health, if you're in better mental health, if you're not making use of emergency room services for those issues, if you're not, if you no longer have to be on mental health disability because you can actually engage in the world and be productive, um, that's going to support the the town. If you have a better nature relatedness, if you have more respect for the environment, I'd say that's a good thing. If you're a better neighbor, if you're a better parent, if you're a better teacher, I think it could have quite a big uh, ripple effect.
Totally.
And I know we want to monetize that, and we probably will. Um, and there's probably early data on that.
Yeah, people love stats. So, for now, I think we could extrapolate that if there's going to be positive impact on one person, that would spread to the community kind of exponentially.
Sure. And also, just one thing, if you're getting a treatment that you have to do once or twice or three times versus for the rest of your life, well, that's going to be cost effective, isn't it?
Big time.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine too, like just this improvement in mental health is what spreads out through families, right? When one person is working on like that deep trauma, it changes how they engage with the whole family. So, cities and municipalities are measured on the metrics of like domestic violence, suicide, heart disease, cancers, like all of these are metrics that they are measured on and then ranked within a state, ranked within the country. And so when we start, when people are in better mental health, I'm sure the data is out there that there's less domestic violence, that all of these other markers start to improve. And, if those are metrics that they are being judged on, and maybe that means that different funds and grants that they can get approved for as those statistics change. Like there has to be, maybe in the gym, Joe, that's a great way for us to sort of start like kind of putting some of these pieces together of like, what metrics do we know are benefited through psychedelics that are related to these other rankings and funds and that sort of things. Like if we can maybe put that monetary, make it more, put a number to it, an estimation, of course, of what that could look like and why that may be beneficial. What is
Right,
the
you tie
cost
it to something.
per call to 911?
Right. Yeah, even that, even not having to there's a lot of strain on public services, and if you could start tying the benefits of psychedelics to those, and I think everyone on the call, and we've looked at the data, we've heard testimony in many contexts, it is efficacious. It will have those effects. So yeah, if we can tie them down to metrics and extract, and project, I think that's a compelling argument for sure. Sarah,
can we just address Nick's question?
Yes, thank you. This is a great question. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, about the organizations for training.
Yeah. I'll just state the question because I'm not sure if everyone in the video can later see it. It's how do therapists or future facilitators/guides determine which organizations' training and certifications will be honored in the future if they want to get started now? So effectively, if you want to be a facilitator in New Jersey and you want to get a certificate now, and we've talked about this offline too, where do you go? What should you do? Should you wait? Should you do it? Can you do it?
I might wait until we see what happens in the fall. I would say it's a safe bet if you want to go through Fluence or Sound Mind, CIIS, Naropa, IPI. Those are safe bets. We won't know. We won't have the specifications about what is going to be required in New Jersey in regards to the training. So that is one of the questions that's up for grabs.
But I think to your point, Fluence, who you obtained your training from, is very prominent, and Sound Mind, is right over the river in Pennsylvania and is effectively here in Jersey, and it's all as a top, it's also extremely prominent. So yeah, if we were betting people, we would say probably that's a good bet.
Yeah, and I think there's supposed to be reciprocity between states.
Yeah, we shall see. It's not in writing yet from at least the most current bill. But that's a hope. So yeah, I would say I would also agree, like, to give it a little bit more time, see what the final piece looks like.
Yeah. This has been great.
Yeah, this is really fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on any other time as this continues to develop with the bill, and we'll see where we are.
I know we gained a lot. I mean, this just having a solid hour to sit down and focus on these questions, because these questions we're talking about, they're real live questions. We're grappling with them.
Yeah.
It's tangible. So really, thank you for helping, for putting your head together with us and thinking this through. And thank you to Guy and Nick and Jim for jumping in the chat. Very helpful.
Yeah. All right, we'll do it again. Onward.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.